All right, we're going to go ahead and get started on our webinar today. Welcome everyone to the webinar, Developing an Evaluation Plan, Outcomes and Measures for the BFRDP grant program, which is the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program. I'm just going to give a quick overview of the WebEx program and some of the different controls and features here. So if you have any issues with your audio quality or connection, feel free to go up in the upper left-hand corner of your screen to the audio feature in order to change those settings. If you have any questions regarding tech troubleshooting or otherwise, feel free to send that via the chat box, which is a feature in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. I'm happy to help with any tech troubleshooting, and also throughout the webinar, if you have questions, you're welcome to submit them using the chat feature. We will have time at the end for plenty of questions and answers. You can also see that when you enter a question or comment into the chat box, you can choose who you want to send that to, if it's everyone or just to the host or panelists. And then just a quick note, after the webinar, we'll be sharing out a recording of the webinar, the PowerPoint slide presentation, and a link to an evaluation to provide your feedback, and links to other resources that might be relevant. So anyone who is registered or has attended the webinar will receive that information, plus we'll be posting it online to New Entry's website. So to introduce who all is here today, we have Jan Perez, who will be giving the bulk of the presentation. I am seeing some people have questions around the sound. So again, if you're having issues, feel free to send any information through the chat feature. I'll try to address those questions. So again, we work with a number of great partners who have various topic area expertise. So again, today you'll be hearing from Jan Perez, the Research and Education Specialist at the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Additionally, we work very closely with Allison Goin, a Strategic Development and Program Design Consultant, who has a wealth of experience and knowledge of the BFRDP program in addition to other USDA grant programs. And then myself, I'm Kristen Aldrich, the National Technical Assistance Manager at New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. And so just to give a little bit more context and information around New Entry and our work with the BFRDP program, in addition to our own incubator farm training program and food hub and CSA that we run in Eastern Massachusetts, New Entry operates national networks of farmer training organizations and technical assistance for two different USDA grant programs, being the Community Food Projects Grant Program and the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program, or BFRDP. So today, of course, we are talking about the BFRDP grant program, and in particular, developing evaluation plans for successful proposals. So we were awarded a grant from BFRDP to provide applicant assistance, and we offer support for applicants through webinars like this one, as well as online tools and resources, such as our online self-assessment tool, which helps gauge readiness to apply for BFRDP, as well as an FAQ portal where you can ask questions of BFRDP and NIPA staff, and then other links to helpful resources. So you can check out that information at nesfp.org/BFRDP for further information, and we'll include a link and resources to that in our follow-up email after the webinar. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Jan Perez to talk a bit more about evaluation plans.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Kristen mentioned, the purpose of this webinar today is to help education programs develop outcomes and measures for their evaluations. And these outcomes and measures can be used for creating a general evaluation plan or even more directly for your BFRDP proposal. So this webinar builds off the last one we did in September, which is where we went over more in detail on how to create an evaluation plan. And we received feedback from participants requesting more details and specific examples, particularly on how to know what you want to know. So determining needed information. So that's really what we're going to focus on here today. Oops, I forgot to lower the slide. And so it is our hope that as a result of the presentation that you'll understand basically the basic steps for identifying outcomes, and that you'll have ideas for how to measure them, particularly for your next BFRDP proposal. So this presentation was primarily designed for organizations who don't do much evaluation currently, or whose staff haven't had much or any evaluation training. However, it can also be useful for those that have had some evaluation experience but would like to learn more, or for others who just want to get some more ideas regarding outcome and measurement possibilities. So here's what I'm going to talk about today. So first, I'll review evaluation plan development steps. Then we'll explore more specific steps for developing outcomes in the context of a BFRDP project. Then I'll provide 3 different examples for different types of programs, those working with aspiring farmers, early beginners, and advanced beginners. So first, on to that background context of an evaluation plan, because that's really the bigger picture of what's going on. So we want to just revisit that. And so what is an evaluation plan? It is basically a written document outlining the purpose, process, and measurable items for the evaluation. It describes how you will do it and what you will do with the results. So this can be a big document aimed at serving your entire organization, or it can, you know, in the simplest manner. Oh, I just had something come on my screen. I don't know what that is. Let me know if you can't hear me or something's going on weird. So again, it's also the 2-page piece of the BFRDP proposal looking at outcomes is in a sense a very short and concise evaluation plan. So why create one? Besides just getting the proposal funded, it helps you think through all the steps that need to happen in evaluation. Writing it up in a simple way also provides something to return to, ensuring that you stay on course, so you aren't recreating the wheel every few months when you have to go back to it. It also provides a method for getting feedback from stakeholders, which is really important. So when to create one? Ideally, this is something that you think through ahead of time, not 2 days before the proposal is due. The more you think through it ahead of time, the more beefy and useful it will be for you. Additionally, BFRDP review panelists are particularly keen to see strong evaluation plans. So again, the more upfront you can do things, the better. And there's a lot of support resources to choose from. Again, on New Entry's website, we have some resources listed under the last evaluation webinar in September that provide also some worksheets that you can basically use to fill in the worksheet to create an evaluation plan. So the basic steps of creating a plan. The first 2 really help you get super clear and really guide what you're doing so you don't end up kind of going all over the place, and really help use your time and resources well. So the first is to get really clear on your purpose. So are you doing this evaluation just to be accountable to your funder or meet requirements? Are you intending to improve the program with this? Are you planning to gather information that you might use in future proposals to other funders? Really important questions to know up front. The second step is developing your frame and identifying more specific, or I would say maybe broad evaluation questions. This includes getting clear about what parts of the program you're evaluating and what you aren't. It also includes being really clear about how you plan to use this information, such as who's the intended audience and what they really need to know. Those 2 questions are the things you really want to guide you when developing a larger evaluation plan. The next step is determining needed information. What are your outcomes and what are the measures you want to use? That's what we'll pretty much talk about today. These other 4 items, collecting data, analyzing and summarizing findings, and using the findings, you can always return to either the slides or recording of the previous webinar to get more information on that as well. So now we'll start exploring how to develop outcomes, and we're going to do it in the context of the BFRDP RFA and their materials more generally. Now, since the specifics about how to write up the outcome-based reporting section of a proposal can and do change frequently, I'm going to speak more to the larger goals of the program than the specific instructions that were in the last RFA. So we're going to start with the BFRDP's goal. So the stated primary goal is to help beginning farmers and ranchers to enter in and or improve their success in farming, ranching, and management of forest lands. So from that, we can pull out what seems to be their primary evaluation questions, and these are stated roughly in different ways in some of their materials, which are more farmers and ranchers starting to farm or getting closer to it, or are farmers and ranchers now more successful? And before I fully jump into how to create the outcomes, we will just quickly define a couple terms. So outcomes are what you want to see happen as a result of your program. So for example, farmers implement what they learned in a workshop. Indicators are another really common term used in evaluation literature. I used the term in the other webinar I did in September. They get more specific detail about really what you want to see happen, such as 50 or 75% of the farmers report implementing a time-saving water management strategy from the workshop. So builds off the outcome, more specific. So I'm not going to use the term indicators that much in this presentation just because it's not really used widely in the BFRDP literature. And just also what's good to note is sometimes these terms, outcomes and indicators, have been used interchangeably. Sometimes, depending on how specific an outcome might be, it kind of blends more into an indicator. So it's really not that important at the moment other than to know that these terms are out there and that I'll be speaking more specific about outcomes. What is good to note is that the way that this indicator, this example indicator I have here, have listed here, at least in the last RFA, there's a little worksheet that for the evaluation part that wanted you to put this type of information in it, and they're very specific about that with their instructions, or they were. So when brainstorming and developing your outcomes, these are a series of things that can both help you brainstorm and help you go back and refine once you've got your first list. They're the things you really want to consider. So I'm going to go through each of these individually now. So program goals and activities. So what is your program or the program offering to impact farmer success? What kind of topics, what kind of skills and knowledge? So here's a list of items that are needed for farmers and ranchers to be successful. Again, a program can work on many of these or just one or a few. And so what you want to do is choose outcomes that really get at your primary activities. So particularly if you touch a little bit of everything, that can be potentially a little challenging. There's some other strategies that could work, and I'll show some of those later. But generally be thinking about what is the primary thing you want to work with. And audience qualities are another really important thing to think about. So different audiences will come with different experiences and resources that can really impact how quickly and what kinds of outcomes you might expect. So regarding experience, you're going to expect different things from someone who's never farmed before but wants to, is in the aspiring category, as compared to someone who's been doing it for 7 years. Same with the resources. If your program happens to focus on a specific audience that, say, already has access to land or resources, or they have a family background in farming, you might expect different outcomes from them. Similarly, if your target audience has less resource than most, such as new Americans, you would want to also adjust your outcomes to be more fitting, given that they have more barriers to success. Again, context plays a huge role in what you might expect. If people from the program or your program tend to go farm or are farming in the vicinity, the cost of land or the availability of it can really impact your outcomes. The commodity or crop type could impact them, local state regulations, farm scale, how much access is there to market, are markets saturated, are there new opportunities, things like that also really impact what you choose to pick for outcomes. Besides program characteristics, there's other kind of evaluation concepts that are good to think about when creating your outcomes, and one is what happens over time. So good to think about short-term, medium-term, and long-term outcomes generally. Short-term are changes in knowledge, attitudes, skills, awareness, or intentions, and these are normally the things that, say, happen right after a workshop. Medium-term changes in behaviors as a result of learning or immediate impacts from those actions. I'm going to just stop for a minute. I have an email from Kristen, so I just want to make sure. Okay. All right, it looks like WebEx has bombed out for our host. So if she can't get back on, I will then do the questions and answers at the end. And hopefully she'll be able to be able to get back on, but for the moment I appear to be the host. So that also means I won't be able to respond probably real quickly to your questions and answers. So hopefully we don't have too many issues going on out there. All right, back to the slide on medium-term changes. These are things we generally expect within the 3-year period of a BFRDP project, and long-term are more changes in social, economic, or environmental conditions. So ideally in your proposal, you want to include at least both short and medium-term outcomes. However, if you're working on a renewal proposal or your education organization has been doing beginning farmer training for a long time, they'd more likely want to see more long-term types of things. And long-term can also just be basic farming information of how many have started farming independently and how many are continuing to farm. So another important piece of developing outcomes is getting stakeholder feedback. So again, this is a really key piece of developing an evaluation plan. And so when you're doing that in general, you're asking people to get at what's important to look at to help them frame the overall evaluation, as well as what kind of outcomes they might want to see. So let's see. So below here are listed a few questions that you might want to ask some of your stakeholders. So for example, if this program is a success, how would you know? What would you expect to happen, or what would you expect to see? Some specific things you might ask farmers are, what actions do you hope to take as a result of this project? Or what kinds of results would you like to see this program share on their website for future farmers who might participate? And at least in the last RFA, they asked or said they, I don't know, not necessarily prefer, but appreciate a participatory evaluation. And part of that means getting feedback like this in this kind of inclusive manner. Another way of developing outcomes is to use a logic model or theory of change, and this kind of helps you, the logic model, which is this is a picture of here, helps you think through what are the inputs, what are we starting with, what are the activities we're going to do, what do we expect people to directly take out of it, and then coming up with your outcomes so it has that kind of logical flow. A theory of change is similar in that you look at this ending point of what do you want to see happen, like successful farmers, and you work backwards with what outcomes do you need to see to get there. And so both of these ways are another way of brainstorming these, and there's more information on these on the new entry website. And a really good way to just start with your brainstorming for outcomes is to use the Rds System Guidelines. So these are, the Rds system is a reporting portal for all BFRDP projects. There's two reporting places in a sense. There's the NEPA mandated report system, and then the Rds is specifically for BFRDP. And it was hoped to get more information that really is applicable to education programs and to aggregate outcomes and to provide a place where organizations can really learn from each other. So part of that system tracks outcomes, and they suggest these particular words as a way of really identifying those outcomes. And so they really look at farmer behavior specifically. So and I've categorized them here based on which ones really kind of in the short-term category or medium-term category, and the ones in the bottom are kind of in both. These terms don't cover all possible outcomes you might want to look at. You might want to look at things of how farmers are impacted by the actions they take or the programs, such as increased income. You can definitely feel free to keep tracking that and report it in the NEPA system. But regardless, this is a really good place to start. So now I'm going to take another quick moment to look at the next email that came through on our WebEx situation. Great. We have Allison will help with questions and answers, and it looks like Kristen actually might be back. That's great. So now what I'll do is walk through 3 different program scenarios and talk about, show example outcomes and measures that one could use for them. So the 3 examples are, the first is teaching aspiring farmers agronomic skills, the second, supporting farmers in their first couple of years in an incubator, the third, supporting farmers in their 6th to 10th year to really build their business. So the first scenario for aspiring beginning farmers and ranchers, this theoretical program, its primary goals are to help folks become proficient in agronomic skills and to introduce marketing and business skills. The activities to get there is through an 8-month intensive training program focusing on specialty crops. The audience is mostly new to farming, though a couple have land. And the context is that land is really expensive and people tend to stay in the area. So some example outcomes you could expect from something like this or this type of program might choose is that in the short term that the participants learn basic agronomic knowledge and skills for specialty crops, and that they learn basic knowledge about marketing and business. You might also hope that they feel prepared to start farming and feel more confident to grow crops by the end of the program, and that at that point they still have plans to start farming in the next 5 years. And here I've chosen 5 years because in this example program, land is really expensive and most of these folks are new. So it might actually take them quite a while to really just get started on their own. As far as desired medium-term outcomes, this program might really focus more on being more prepared, the number being more prepared to start farming, such as managing or operating a farm or continuing education to start farming. Again, because of land being expensive and people being newer, that these might be really what you would expect to most happen for people. And however, of course, since the main goal of the BFRDP is to get people to start farming independently and to be successful, you probably want to keep in how many, or still track how many started farming independently. So how might you measure these? So to measure if people learned agronomic and marketing knowledge and skills, this might be a good time to use a pre and post test, looking at several topics. So what I have here is an example of what we use at the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems. We have the apprenticeship program in ecological horticulture. It's a 6-month program, and we use this kind of pre-post. Here is one of the domains out of 16, soil fertility, and you can see there's several items underneath where people rate themselves at the beginning and then again at the end of the season. And this can be reported, this can be an indicator or reported in this way, such as we expect that 40 or 80% of the participants increased their average overall score by 1 level. So on average, they went from some exposure to some competency, for example. And for medium-term examples for this program, they could do a follow-up survey at the end of the 3 years. Basically ask these questions of all who were served in the first 2 years of the program. So basically you're getting people that have left for at least a year to see what they've done. And you can ask them if they are currently farming independently and if they've taken any other steps to start farming, such as worked on a farm, looked for land, taken other training courses, saving money for land, etc. And again, here's some example indicators or reporting possibilities. You could say 35 or 75 or 70% of these have taken actions to start farming, or 10 or 20% have started farming independently. As you can see, I've listed things, started farming independently kind of low, and then taken actions to start farming much higher based on, again, the issues that this program is addressing. So in scenario 2, we're going to look at those that are just beginning to farm. The example program goals to gain confidence in production skills, help participants access land, and help improve marketing skills. The activities to do this are people are in an incubator. They're taking classes on a variety of topics, and they have a strong focus on land access. So they're focusing, this hypothetical program focuses on people in their first and second year, though I think many incubators keep people for a lot longer than that. But in this situation, we'll say first and second year. The context is that they're in a peri-urban environment in a budding localization movement. So some example outcomes for this program would be that the participants learn basics about land access strategy. You might expect that. Again, after workshops, they feel more prepared to lease or purchase land as a result of workshops. They feel confident in working with marketing vendors or contacts, and this is something that might happen from having some experience with it, and that they plan to look for land in the next couple years. Regarding medium-term examples of outcomes and behaviors, they're more prepared to start farming on their own land, either leased or purchased, and they started farming independently from the incubator, might as well be a medium term. Of course, with this program being 3 years and maybe people staying on for 2, that might actually be a little harder to track within the specific frame of the BFRDP grant, but could potentially at least do it for 1 year of graduates. And other results you might want to look at is if they have increased income. So ways to measure this might be, again, surveys at the end of a workshop. How much did your understanding regarding, or how much did your understanding increase regarding developing land leases? Could be a general question to get at. A survey at the end of the year might get at them a little bit farther down the line. This also blurs a bit into the medium-term outcomes, to what extent you feel prepared to look for land. I should say, you know, that could be asked again right after a workshop or even at the end of a year. And survey at the end of a 3-year program. Have you secured a land lease? Have you purchased land? Do you tend to start farming outside the incubator? And that last one might be the most relevant if people do stay on a bit longer. So scenario 3, example program looking at those that surveying established beginning farmers and ranchers, and the primary goal of this hypothetical program is to help them create a solid business and to help farmers be fully connected in the community. Activities is providing a variety of workshops and providing mixers and structures to help farmers get connected. They're focusing primarily on those in their 6th through 10th year, and it's in a rich ag region. Example outcomes for this group, again, since they're really focusing on community connection as one piece, you might want people to have learned the importance of community connection from the workshops. At the end of a workshop, maybe they feel more confident to develop their business from the information you've given them, and that they have plans to implement strategies based on the workshops. So some medium-term outcomes you might want is that farmers participate in other farmer organizations and meetings. They obtain a mentor or develop similar relationships, or they've made changes to their business and financial practices. And one result this type of kind of inclusive program might want is an increased business health. So how you might measure some of this, again, an end of workshop survey for community connection, asking them at that point what groups and organizations do they plan to attend, or how many group meetings do they plan to attend. At the end of other workshops, you could ask them what they plan to implement from this workshop and how confident they feel to do that. And then at the end of the 3-year BFRDP program, there could be a survey to get at, again, the issue of connection, and asking if they've been able to get help or ideas from other farmers when they needed it, which seems like at least one of the goals of getting people connected is that they can get ideas or help or things like that. And using a business health assessment instrument can be a way of getting at business health. So here is an example of the business health assessment instrument. I'm going to scroll through my notes so I can talk about it a bit more clearly. So this was originally a tool developed by educators who work regularly with more advanced beginning farmers. And first draft was developed and put on the California FarmLink website, and there's a link to it down at the bottom there. And you can also just go to the California FarmLink site and search there as well. So this instrument is still being further developed by the Farm Credit Council, What it does is it gets at all the needed knowledge, skills, and behaviors necessary for an effective, healthy business. From people, and again, this is coming from the perspective of those that do farm credit and help farm with finances and taxes and business. So it has questions on topics about marketing and accounting, financial planning, taxes, labor, etc. Now, since it's common for many beginning farmer programs to cover this array of information, this type of instrument can be really useful. This instrument can be modified or used as is to assess all these topics. Some sections can be used if you prefer. However, the author suggests that really using the whole thing, and particularly to use it at the beginning of the program in a pre-post fashion. And part of the reason to do it at the beginning is as a learning instrument as well as an evaluation instrument. So it's basically saying people who work really helping farmers get a really operational business have come up with these are really key things that need to be happening in order for that successful business to happen and a healthy business to happen. So, and there's also links to information in each of these. So if they answer no where we want them to answer yes, they can have little notes that say go here to get more information on this topic. So it really helps frame people's minds about this is what I ultimately really need to know, and that can also help frame their learning within your program or even their self-directed learning they need to do. As I mentioned, this is instrument still in further development to the Farm Credit Council, and I'm not entirely sure if they're allowing yet others to be part of that testing or not. When I get the information from that, that's something that we can put on the website as well, if it turns out it's the case that people can join into that testing. So as you, I'm sure, have noticed, we have not covered all possible examples, and there's still many other outcome potentials and measurement potentials out there. So one way of coming up with more is to utilize available instruments as things to kind of brainstorm and bounce off of. So here's a few places you can go for other instruments. The business health assessments listed here, as well as the Small Farm website at Cornell University has a list of a few other instruments that other organizations have used. Additionally, New Entry's Nifty Evaluation Guide has several evaluation instruments located in the back in the appendix that are examples to work from. Of course, there's always the Google search. And just also to note that New Entry and University of California, Santa Cruz, that we were going to keep working together to create more tools for helping people do evaluation efficiently and effectively. So please stay tuned for more updates from New Entry. And so bringing it back together, again, this all fits within your evaluation plan. You can go back to the webinar from September and look at the slides or watch the recording and reorient to where this fits into context if this is newer for you. And again, when you are developing your BFRDP proposal, definitely follow the instructions in the RFA. Super important. They change. So, and then also utilize the latest outcome-based reporting guide for BFRDP. It's on the BFRDP website. And then utilizing any ideas here. So now we'll open it up for question and answer. So let's see if I can offer it back to Kristen.
Hi there, this is Kristen again. And apologies for any technical difficulties. Hopefully that only existed on my end and didn't impact anyone's experience of the webinar. But I'll see if I can pull up questions here as they come through. You're also welcome to use the Q&A feature. There's the chat box and then the Q&A box, so you're welcome to enter questions there as well. One is, what does RVS stand for? And I believe that's the Results Verification System.
Yep, I think you're right.
Let's see. And all right. Jan or Allison, if you see any other questions come through the chat or otherwise, feel free to go ahead and read that out and answer, but I'm not seeing any further questions come through at this time. Oh, here's one more. How much does the size of your impact footprint matter in terms of how they evaluate? And
I'm not sure I fully understand that one.
Yeah, if Maria, if you don't mind clarifying a little further, I think that might be more around the impact of a project when you're submitting an application or your proposal. Let's see. Meaning, are they looking for a minimum number of people trained, et cetera?
That question I can't quite answer.
I could contribute a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
This is Allison Goin. So the first thing to think about with that is whether you're applying for a small or a large grant. The BFRDP funding is now divided into those two categories, and so part of the impact question is addressed by that. So if you are serving a smaller number of farmers, make sure that you're applying in the smaller category, which is still up to $100,000 per year. So that's the first thing, to make sure you're in the right, size grant. And there's more information on all of that too in our online self-assessment tool when you're making that decision. The second thing I would say about that is that it's not, there's no hard and fast rules about it, like there's no minimum number of farmers you have to serve. I've seen programs that serve a smaller number of farmers get funded repeatedly because they provide really intensive long-term services and they have a very strong program. So I don't think, you can necessarily write yourself off if you only have a small number of farmers served. If you're getting good results and you have a good program design and a strong evaluation plan, and you can demonstrate that the reason we're serving a smaller number is because these farmers really need a lot of intensive support. So for instance, like an incubator program for immigrants and refugees who are learning English skills at the same time that they're learning farm business skills, that takes a much higher level of staff involvement and a smaller number of farmers served. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely helpful. So again, if anyone has questions, feel free to enter through that Q&A. A few questions coming through. Does the USDA like programs that use a hard certification or diploma more than those that measure results in other ways?
I wish we had, I don't think we have Wesley Dean on the line. We did for our last one, and he's one of the program officers at the USDA. And so some of these questions I think are really best answered by them. But, the programs are reviewed by, generally on the review panels, a farmer, someone from a nonprofit, and someone from a university, if I understand it correctly. And they're really, the reviewers are really the ones that choose. So you can't really say exactly what they're going to choose, but definitely I would think yeah, I'm not actually sure, that we can say that for sure, but whatever looks like you're substantially tracking what people are doing and their outcomes would definitely be preferred.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if your program does have some kind of certification or a diploma, that to me would indicate there's some kind of standard of different components of the program that someone is completing, and that might be more the pertinent component there, as opposed to having a certificate or piece of paper to give to everyone necessarily. But again, I would agree with Jan that might be a better question left to the BFRDP program contact. And I'm happy also to share that in the follow-up email. Their program or rather their contact information is available in each year's RFA. So that's publicly shared information that I'm happy to send to you all following the webinar as well.
And I would also, can I add one more thing to that?
Yeah.
And in fact, you would be strongly encouraged to, if you're going to do a BFRDP proposal, to contact one of those program officers regardless and ask your questions and talk about what you plan to do and get some feedback from them up front. And they're very open to that and responsive to that.
One more question that has come through. Is it permissible and perhaps desirable to contract with a qualified external evaluator to support the evaluation effort?
It is definitely permissible and desirable, at least according to the last RFA, to get an external evaluator. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, and it's my understanding you can dedicate some funds within your budget for that purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We have one more. Do you have any advice on how to balance asking farmers too many evaluation questions but still gathering important evaluation data? Always a tricky thing to do, because definitely once you start writing surveys, and I've done this with, particularly with the program staff, there's so much they tend to want to know, and so if you really keep it to, one thing you can do is just really what's the most important thing that you want to know, what's the most important goals, what's the beefiest thing you're doing to help farmers either start farming or be more successful, and really focus on that. So if you have, a number of activities, which many programs do, they often do an awful lot of things to, really focus on where the majority of your resources are going and what those outcomes you really want are. But it's hard. It's a constant tension.
Another question came through the chat. I was wondering how to encourage full participation in medium to long-term surveys a few years after an event has occurred. We are lucky to get 60 to 70%.
60 to 70% is great. I know that. It's really good. I mean, it's always going to be a problem, because you're, particularly depending on the type of program you have. If it's a really long-term intensive thing, it might be a little bit easier to maintain some connection or check in with people, for things where people might just go to one workshop, emailing them 3 years later, asking about a workshop they attended, isn't going to be terribly fruitful. So again, those follow-ups are really good to do with people that have received a lot of service in some way, or at least within the past year, kind of depending on what you're trying to get at. Keeping track of people's email addresses, because those things change, other contact information, so that takes effort. But sometimes that's also an important goal for other marketing and other program goal reasons, to keep accurate information about people's contact info. So, but that's another critical piece. And one strategy I've used for a big follow-up survey, I mean, one thing is, of course, to keep it really, really short. Or we did a very long follow-up survey because we hadn't done one in many years at the center, and I videotaped one of our main farmer teachers saying why this was important, and people pretty much opened the email, they clicked the link, and if they clicked the link to watch his video, they took the survey. But that was to get us a 60% response rate, which I thought was outstanding. So your 70% is fabulous. And sometimes the 40% range is roughly more what you may get.
I don't think I see any further questions. Getting some thank yous. You're all very welcome. So feel free to send any more through in these final minutes or so. And also, you're welcome to send any questions to us to the email addresses provided. So again, just another reminder that we'll be sure to send the webinar recording and the presentation slides along with some of these resources we've been referencing via email to anyone who registered and anyone who attended today. And it'll also be posted on our website. So feel free to check back there for future reference. I want to give a big thank you to Jan Perez for such a wonderful presentation, great details and information and useful examples about evaluation, which I know can be such a tricky component of some of these larger grant proposals, and so the information is greatly appreciated and very valuable. So thank you again so much. Thanks to everyone for being here this afternoon.
Can I add,
depending where you're calling in from.
Can I add one more thing? I really wanted to, again, encourage people to fill out the evaluation survey we have at the end of this, as we are hoping to do more work in the evaluation realm, providing more technical assistance. And so your feedback will be really useful and really help us chart our next direction. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd be remiss to have an evaluation webinar without plugging our own evaluation. So. Thank you, and thank you all in advance for that. And yeah, I don't see any further questions, so I'll leave it there. Again, feel free to follow up via email, and we thank you all for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your day.